Hi everyone, my name is Dave, and welcome to Extra Credit, a video series where we take an unscripted look at topics related to local history and exploring that history.
All right, so before we get into today's episode, just a quick reminder to first of all visit my website. There's a link in the description. There's all kinds of content on there related to some of the things that we take a look at in this video series. Also, please make sure that you follow me on social media. So you'll find me on Facebook, you'll find me on Twitter, you'll find me on Instagram, and there's a lot of content that drops regularly on there. And finally, please make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. As many other video series like to say, please make sure you smash that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. There's a lot of content that drops regularly on here, and by subscribing, you'll make sure that you'll get all of that notifications and all of that content sooner than it would normally do when it goes on social media. All right, so just a quick note about today. We're actually all set up to record this outside because in the spring and the summer, I like to kind of move the videos outside. Unfortunately, this year we have a bit of a black fly problem, and so we did try to record outside, but even with the thermocell going, there was just swarms of black flies, and so that wasn't working out too well. So today is basically a follow-up episode. So it's essentially a part 2 to a video that we did last year. And so what we're taking a look at is, again, we're coming back to the Pee Dee Railway and essentially following up. But this one's going to be a little bit different. So in that first episode, what I did was I spent some time talking a little bit about the railway, talking a little bit about my interest in the railway. And so what we're going to do today is we're actually going to kind of move outside of the interior confines, and we're actually going to go out and take a look at some parts of the PD and essentially sort of show those to you. And I know I've done videos on them, we've kind of done that, but this is kind of a little bit more of a sort of a different angle and kind of sort of more showing you where some of these places are and what can be kind of found at some of these places, as opposed to just kind of describing sort of the location and kind of the history of the location. So hopefully you kind of enjoy this sort of field episode. All right, welcome to our outdoor segment of this episode. We are here in Rosslyn, Ontario, which is just to the west of Thunder Bay. We are standing here on what used to be the grade of the Port Arthur, Duluth and Western, or the PD. We're precisely at a place called Twin City Junction. And so what this used to be is basically a junction point between, at one time, the Canadian Northern Railway and later Canadian National Railways. And so the significance of this is it's basically one of the last places where you can find some trackage of the Pee Dee Railway, and that is located just right behind me right here. So just to give you kind of a little bit of background, a little bit of context of this, so the PD, the Port Arthur, Duluth and Western, was built between 1889 and opened in 1893. And this basically right here, we're standing on the original grade that used to come from Port Arthur all the way west to Gunflint Lake. Now, what happened was in 1899, the railway line was bought by what would eventually become Canadian Northern Railway. And Canadian Northern wanted the PD for its line to Winnipeg that it was building from Port Arthur to Winnipeg. Now, when they built this line, they wanted basically the 19 miles that ran from Port Arthur back in that direction over there, so basically 11 railway miles that way, all the way to Stanley. Which is about 8 miles in that direction to the west. And so the railway line to Winnipeg was completed in 1902. And so from 1902 to 1911, the junction point between the PD, which eventually became known as the North Lake Subdivision, originally was called basically the Ontario Division, was later called the Gunflint section. There was a whole bunch of different names that they used, the Duluth extension. So the junction point used to be Stanley. Now, what happened is that the grades on the main line from Stanley to Quebec, which was the next station, weren't particularly great. So starting in 1909, what Canadian Northern did is they started work on basically a rerouting of the line, and so they were going to basically bypass that very difficult stretch of track between Stanley and Quebec, and so they started the cutoff right here, and so essentially this became known as Twin City Junction. And so starting in 1911, this became the junction point between the North Lake subdivision, the PD, and the mainline track, which eventually became known, which was originally the Port Arthur subdivision, and then eventually it changed its name as well. And when Canadian National took over, this remained the junction point. And so this line here, you can see this is still part of the Canadian National Railway network. This is known as the Kashabawi subdivision. That's what it was known as back then, and remains as that today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flash up a couple of timetables for you so you can take a look at that. All right, so essentially what we have here, as I mentioned, is the remains of this line. And so what happened, fast forward a bunch of years, so the PD was abandoned in 1938, and they left about a mile and a half of track or so that ran from this point here all the way to just into Rosslyn itself, where there was a brick plant. And those tracks remained in place until 1989. And so in 1989, they ripped up the rails, basically right from this point. There's a fence just up there. We'll walk over there. And the rails were ripped up from that fence all the way into the brick plant. And so this section was left, and it connected to the Kashabawi subdivision up there. So there's a road crossing, and so just to the west of that road crossing, and the road's called Twin City Crossroads. And so it basically ran through this area here to here. Now this, I guess what you could call a little spur with these original tracks remained here until I believe the fall of 2019. This was basically pulled up and disconnected, and so this is the last little section that's left of I guess what you could consider to be the Pee Dee Railway. You can see some of the vestiges of this. You can see some of the old tie plates. You can see some of these rails. I don't know if we can make out any. I've looked at some of them before, and the grass is really high. We're into June here, and I remember looking at these at one point. You can see the tie plates are old. They're 1926. I remember looking at these rails, and they were 1903 rails. Yeah, it's hard to make out anything on this. And so we'll just follow this along a little bit here. One of the things that you'll notice about the rails is that they're very, very small. So these are likely very light gauge rails. They're probably 60-pound rails, so 60 pound per yard. That's how they used to measure them. So when the PD was built, the original rails were 56-pound rails. And I know that 60 became kind of the next step up. And then they moved to 85, and then 100. And most modern rails today are 115 pound. There you go. There's the date. I can't read what that says. But there's the date on there. 1903. And so, again, these rails were used a little bit. There's a big fenced off area over here. and essentially this was kind of a storage yard for one of the local businesses here in Rosslyn, and the rails were used basically as a spur to kind of offload materials for that business. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link in the I put it up on the screen, but I'm also going to put it in the description as well. And so you'll be able to check out a video that I made in 2012, so 10 years ago, where you'll actually see the rails still in place here. And you can actually see them very, very well. They're not kind of all overgrown as they are now, and sort of gives you a little bit of a a sense of kind of what this looked like, not all kind of overgrown and difficult to sort of see as it is. And so basically this is where everything kind of comes to an end. You can actually see there's an old flat car here, basically being used as a storage trailer. You can see there's a bunch of ties here, and again, so this is where basically the rails would have continued, and here you can see sort of this storage area, but they would have continued in that direction over there. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to jump up ahead, and you'll be able to see a little bit more of the old grade. All right, so what we've done is we've moved our way a little bit further to the west, where we were, probably just a few hundred meters to the east. And so what we're here on is the former grade here in Rosslyn. You can see we're kind of up on a little bit of an elevated embankment. And so again, this would have been one of the first pieces of this rail line that would have been built, and so going back to 1889, when construction started on the Pee Dee Railway, they basically started construction back in this area, just a little bit further to the east in Westfort. And so this would have been built, this embankment here and the rails laid on it, back in the fall of 1889. And you can see that there's still a little bit of traffic that travels along this former piece of grade here. And I know for myself, this is actually one of the few recollections that I have of this rail line. So I can remember as a kid, I was a 70s kid, and so I was, in my teens when this, the last remaining piece of the railway through this area here was pulled up. But I can remember, so I do have recollections as a kid of seeing some cars. I can't remember if I want to say box cars. There were some box cars lined up along this along this embankment. Through the trees down there, we can actually see I can hear it, and there's a Kaministiquia River. And so I'll just kind of walk you along here a little bit more. Kind of a very sort of pretty area here. And so you can kind of, gives you kind of a little bit of a sense of, what the area would have appeared like when the trains are running through here. This whole stretch, basically from here all the way up to Stanley. So for the next, I guess 8 miles or so, 9 miles is actually a very, very beautiful area. The railway grade essentially skirts along side the Kaministiquia River, and so it is very, very pretty and very scenic. And just further ahead, the railway grade is the road is actually built on top of the old railway grade. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to hold up here, and then I'm going to show you a few more pieces as the grade kind of heads to the west. All right, so what we've done is we've moved our way further west. We're into kind of Rosslyn proper. You can actually see, I don't know if you can make it out on the camera's kind of backlit here, but you can see the big sign that says the Rosslyn Community Center. And essentially we're right here, we're right on the grade itself. And so the grade would have basically come through in this area here. So right here, right in this spot here would have been the station here at Rosslyn. And so Rosslyn wasn't the original name. The original name of this station here was it was known as Slate River. Basically refers to sort of the geographical area here. There's a river that is south of the Kaministiquia River known as the Slate River, so it's kind of called the Slate River Valley. So essentially, again, we basically have the railway grade coming through here, and we have this station that was located here. The station that was here at Rosslyn stuck around for a number of years. I think it was still here in the 1980s, if I remember correctly, and probably was removed around the time that the rails were pulled out of here. And you know, there was, I guess, a little bit of controversy, a little bit of discussion about, you know, the fact that maybe the station should be saved. And unfortunately, it wasn't really much of an elaborate station. It was more like, you know, a bit of a shed, if you will. Again, I don't really remember, you know, at the time this is all happening. I would have been a teenager, and, you know, I grew up not too far from here. But you know, I don't really sort of remember, you know, things that were kind of unfolding in this area. And again, as we're kind of moving our way here west, we're kind of right on top of the original the original grade here, right in this area here. And so the grade would have continued a little bit, continued west over there, and just up there, just through the trees up there, it would have entered something known as the Rosslyn brick plant, and there was a spur. And in this area as well, there used to be a turning Y. So what we're going to do is we're going to move our way ahead and go take a look at the area around the brick plant. All right, so a little bit further to the west here. So this area, this big, huge open area that you see here, was once the site of the Rosslyn Brickworks or Rosslyn Brick Plant. And so the railway grade basically used to cross through right here, kind of right where you see this, I guess, almost like little pathway here. And for many, many years, the rails were still in place. So again, the railway line was pulled up in 1938, or the line was abandoned in 1938, and the tracks remained to this brick plant until 1989. And the rails were still here as of 10 years ago. So again, if you click on that link in the description and you come and you take a look at that video, you'll essentially see some of the rails that are still here. There were still switches because there was basically a spur that ran into the brick plant, and you'll be able to sort of take a look at that and be able to see some of those rails and the ties and the junctions and the switches and everything still in place. And it wasn't pulled up that much after 2012, so I'm kind of glad I got all of that on video. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to push our way a little bit further to the west, and we'll kind of wrap up with the last little sort of outdoor segment of this episode. All right, so this is our last little segment for this episode. So where we are right here is we're standing kind of on this three-way intersection here. This is basically where Rosslyn Road sort of intersects with what's called Fraser Road, and then becomes Hearthstone Drive. And the reason why this is significant is basically this is where the railway line, which essentially came through right here, right in this area here, and basically cut across here, and essentially now kind of becomes Hearthstone Road. And essentially you can see kind of the straight nature of the road as it kind of curves here, and then it becomes straight. So this is essentially you know, where the you know, those vestiges of the railway grade basically disappear and now become this roadway. And so Hearthstone Drive basically continues. And I'll flash the mileage up on the screen because we're kind of right in between kind of cell phone towers here, and I can't remember the mileage from Stanley to Hearthstone. I know it's a couple of miles, but I'll put up exactly there. So basically where we are here is this roadway sits on top of the grade all the way to, as I mentioned, actually past Hearthstone, probably all the way to where the first crossing of the Whitefish River is. So quite a number of miles where the road is on top of the railway grade, and essentially you can drive this all the way from that distance. So if you follow this roadway, so you follow Hearthstone Drive, eventually you'll get to Stanley, which was milepost 19, and the original junction between the Pee Dee and the Canadian Northern, and then it'll take you over the bridge over the Kaministiquia River, and eventually to Hearthstone, and then again you'll kind of get stopped at where you have to cross the Whitefish River. So anyway, so this is kind of the end of this little outdoor segment for this episode. And what we'll do eventually is we'll come back and we will record a little bit more further to the west, and we'll kind of show you a little bit of sort of the area along the Kaministiquia River and kind of what that area looks like. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's episode with the sort of excursion component. It's always nice to sort of get out and about and actually see some of those places that we're talking about and taking a look at. We are going to do more of these types of episodes in the future. So I will be sort of looking at, maybe parts 3 and 4 and things like that. And again, as time allows, these episodes are a little bit more challenging to sort of put together because obviously we have to go out to these particular locations to record them. And there's always time, and there's always weather, and there's always other sort of mitigating circumstances that we have to take a look at. But certainly there will be more of these coming in the future. So in the meantime, please stay tuned for other episodes that we'll be putting together. And thanks a lot for tuning in.